Welcome to the Classroom Narratives Healing and Education podcast, the space where education meets resilience. I'm Dr. Joey Weisler, and in each episode, we dive deep into the personal stories of educators, students, leaders, and frontline advocates who are navigating the complexities within modern education. Whether you're just starting your teaching journey or are a seasoned professional looking for inspiration, we'll explore how to foster meaningful change, prevent burnout, and build trauma-informed communities within our schools. Now, let's take a seat at the front of the classroom as we get started. Welcome back to the Classroom Narratives Healing and Education podcast, where today's guest brings a powerful lens to the conversation, one shaped by the classroom, the courtroom, and the kitchen table. Francis Shefter is an education attorney, former special education teacher, and the founder of Shefter Law PA, where she guides families through the often overwhelming terrain of IEPs and 504 plans. Her trademarked stress-free IEP approach is more than just a legal framework. It's a mindset that empowers parents, strengthens school partnerships, and prioritizes what matters most, the well-being and the dignity of the child. With over a decade of experience in the classroom and nearly 2 decades in law, Frances understands both the heartache and the hope that can sit side by side when advocating for a child with disabilities. She's also a parent herself, and her empathy is matched by her clarity, helping families navigate not just the paperwork, but the emotions, the relationships, and the resilience that all come with that. So today we'll explore what it means to create safer, more collaborative spaces for neurodiverse students and how systems built on compliance can be transformed into communities of care. So Frances, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joey. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
I get that a lot. Thank you so much for that. So, Frances, let's go ahead and start with your background. So, you were a special education teacher before you became an attorney. And what was that period like in your career? And what did you witness in classrooms or even IEP meetings that made you say, wow, this system needs a stronger advocate?
So I started in general education. I did my undergrad in early childhood, and then I went back and got certified in special education. One of the ones that jump out at me most is when I was teaching, back then it was varying exceptionalities, which was mildly intellectually disabled, emotionally disabled, mildly, and learning disabled, all in one class. That's how they did it in Florida. I had twins, and I was looking at their test scores, and I'm like, why are both of these twins still here? Because one of them was higher intelligence and average, and like academic was doing fine, and I just couldn't. And so when I went and talked to somebody about it, they said, oh, well, we're keeping the one back, hoping that the other will catch up. I'm like, that's not the way we do this. And so what I did was I mainstreamed the child into a gen ed reading class and then into math. And the teacher came to me and was like, she belongs here. And so we wound up mainstreaming her totally. And guess what happened? The other twin caught up and got
Yeah.
mainstreamed as well, because it was like, wait, my sister's up here. I want to meet my sister. And so that was like my big one in elementary school. So I was 7 years in teaching there. And then I went up to teach at an alternative middle and high school in Palm Beach County.
Yep.
And I was originally teaching math and science, and I was teaching regular diploma and special diploma in the same classroom of math and science. Oh, yeah. And high school and middle school in the same classroom. Because being an alternative school, we only had 50 students, and that's how they allocate teachers. They don't look at the demand of what these kids need for education to have their IEP implemented and get where they need to be. They look at, you have X amount of students, you get X teachers. I was there about 2 or 3 months before I got promoted to the special ed coordinator, long series of events. And there it was like, I loved it. I loved teaching. I loved the kids, but it wasn't about the kids anymore,
Yeah.
And so that's why I was happy to leave the classroom, because it wasn't about the kids. And a lot of times my kids in the alternative middle and high school, they were, the kids that were basically court ordered, go to school or go to jail or juvie. And a lot of times the schools tried to keep the kids from coming back. And I'm like, no, they came here for their 6 weeks and now they come back. And I'm like, why are you not looking at the child? Well, they did this. I'm like, yeah, they did that. And now we've gotten to the point that that behavior is not going to continue. We need to come back. And again, it was constant fighting. And I'm like, when did it become what might happen? When did it become not giving these kids a chance to grow and change and actually develop? Because that's what education is supposed to be about. So I fought back for this one kid, and I basically told the school, okay, you don't want to accept him back? Don't try to send any more kids to me at all. And they kind of took that back a second and said, we'll take him back, because they realized what that would mean. And I was so happy because a year later I saw him and he was getting all A's and B's and was going to be a physical therapist and was doing amazing. And that's the chance the kid needed. He needed to get out of the school for a little bit and then back again. And so it was just, I realized the schools are doing a disservice for these kids. And I was tired of fighting the system for what these kids needed and deserved.
I love that line because I too have realized that not only do we say that it's not about the kids, but the kids are always the victim of the system's failures. And it's almost like that they're the customer in the system, but they're always being lost to this ongoing custody battle. Like no matter what side they're being pulled, they're always going to be on the losing side of that. And in thinking about that, many educators tend to feel caught between what they know a student needs and what they're allowed to recommend under administrative pressure. So, what advice do you give teachers who want to speak up but feel constrained to do so?
It's funny you should say that because, of course, I still have a lot of teacher friends, and they're like, oh my God, you need to be representing this family. But they know they can't say that. They can't be like, hey, here. So, what I always say is tell them to go to my website and my YouTube channel to educate. The teachers can, if they know this child needs something, they can kind of hint around to the parents of here's a place to go educate yourself on how to advocate for your child. I also tell teachers, like, be honest with the parents. If you need to have that side conversation with them, that's okay too. I always tell my clients, look, I can tell you right now, it's not the teacher. I can guarantee the teacher does have your child's best interest at heart. Unfortunately, what I know from the inside is it's administrator, it's central office, it's whatever else saying, don't find kids eligible. We can't afford it anymore. We don't have the class space, or don't do this, or don't. And the teachers, what are they going to do? They can't go against their boss, even though they want to, but that's their livelihood. So I always say the teachers tell you something in private, great. We won't call the teacher out at a meeting ever. But I will then be able to go know what the teacher is thinking and be able to find the data within the child's record to be able to fight for what that child needs. And when I flat out ask the teacher, what do you think about that? I kind of put them in a spot that they don't have a choice but answering me correctly. So I give them that out, that they can say what they want in a way that the principal can't get mad at them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So do the roundabout way to fight for the kids, because if you don't and the parents don't know to, then who does?
I never realized that bureaucracy almost always wins. I said almost.
Mhm. Yeah,
Bureaucracy almost always wins over the student's best interest. And I never understood as a pre-service educator that our hands are tied more than we know. What are some ways that we can work around the bureaucracy as educators?
it's a hard one. I mean,
Yeah.
as a teacher, it was like, shut the door and do what you need to do in the
Mm.
classroom. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like my principal, she knew what was going on in my classroom, but she didn't know what was going on in my classroom, if that makes sense. Like as long as the kids are learning and the parents are happy, you're usually in a good space. Um, Going around the bureaucracy is so hard because even though with tenure and stuff, you can't necessarily lose your job, you can get involuntarily transferred. There are other things that administrators and central office can do. But what I always say is to keep true to yourself and keep true to the kids. And if what you think, what you're doing and where you are, you can't make that change, figure out if there's another way or if there's another place that could use your expertise so that you're staying true to yourself and you're still helping the children.
Thank you so much for that. Could you tell us about maybe some specific pedagogies or strategies that have worked in classrooms of neurodivergent learners? We talk quite a bit about mainstream classrooms and ways to build community and work alongside students for mutual understanding? What are some strategies that are also effectively transferred into the neurodivergent classroom or the alternative classroom space?
I always found it interesting when I went back and did my master's and I was learning how to teach neurodivergent children. Some of the strategies they taught, I was like, seriously, this would have worked in my gen ed classroom. Like, why isn't this taught? And so for the general education teachers that have the kids with the IEPs, that you have 25 kids in your class, 8 of which have an IEP, like you're going to be able to teach individually, is to look at the IEP, right? I know. Look at the IEPs and see how you can incorporate what that child needs into the classroom. So, for example, if you have a child that needs a movement break, well, guess what? If you're teaching elementary school, all your kids probably need a movement break. And so during every transition, let's do head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Let's run around the classroom. Let's clean our desks. Let's move books. Something that you're now implementing the IEP, but you're also incorporating the whole school. So it's true inclusion for our kids. And it goes the same with the special education. You have a classroom of 8 kids, all with individual IEPs. How am I going to teach them all individually? It's find that common thread in their IEPs and work it together into one plan.
So it sounds like standard implementation is another way to get across what different IEPs might be asking for. And I
Yeah,
tried to do the same. Like if I had an IEP where the student needed a handout, like a printed copy, I would try, if I had the resources, to make a handout for everybody in the room and give
yep,
everybody access to all the resources that are present and available.
right. Because that's the thing, like you can never, as a teacher, a parent is not going to say, you gave my kid too much. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yep.
Like,
You
like
did too much for them.
right, exactly. You gave them too much support. You did too much. Now, that being said, we don't want to hold the kids' hands too much. We want to be able to develop. But if you start by giving the child the notes and then move to guided notes, you're teaching the child how to take notes. And then you're teaching the independence. You're doing that scaffolding to build upon the skills. And all kids need to do that.
And when it comes to actually building classroom climate and classroom structure, what are some different methods that can be implemented into the alternative classroom to maintain that?
Um, Respect. I find the more we respect our children and treat them not like little adults, but as human and valued, the more they're going to respect and value themselves and they're going to respect and value you. I had one of the toughest classes. I was substituting at the alternative middle and high school. And like even the behaviorist was like, do you need me to support you? I'll be there in a minute if you need anything, like knowing what I was walking into. And I walked into that classroom and I went, you all have an A right now. And they're like, what? We didn't do anything. Like, you have an A. You have an A. Now you need to keep that A. Can I tell you? The principal was like, what did you do? Like, how did you get these kids to work? And that was it because they didn't want to lose what they had already. Forget trying to earn something. That's too hard for them. But now that they have it, you can't take that away. So it's that out of the box thinking that what will motivate your children? What works for your children? What do they need? When I taught in the inner city, I knew a lot of my kids didn't have breakfast in the morning. And if they didn't come before the cafeteria closed, they didn't eat. Well, I don't know about you, but if I'm over hungry, I'm not learning anything. And so I would always have food in my classroom, always. And all the kids always knew it. And the cafeteria knew I did it. So they always gave me extra cereals and milks. I had a little refrigerator that my kids knew that if they were hungry, they came to me and I will make sure they have food. And I sent food home for the kids that I knew I needed to send home over the weekend because they wouldn't have much food for the weekend. And that's the thing, is like making sure the kids' basic needs are met helps. And then also, what do they need in the sense of how to tap into their strengths rather than focusing on their weaknesses so much.
Love it, love it. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I always appreciate when we acknowledge that here together. So, if we could wave a wand and fix one systematic barrier in the IEP or 504 process, what would that look like? And what can everyday educators and families do to help push forward change to continue, as you mentioned earlier, just try to work around the bureaucracy in a safe but manageable way?
Focus on the children. Focus on the child's needs. We all say we're focusing on the children. We all talk about it, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard in an IEP meeting, oh, we don't do that. Excuse me? It's an individual education plan. What do you mean you don't do that? I have one client at every single IEP meeting, she has an 8x10 picture of her child that she picks up and puts on the table. This is who we're talking about. We're not talking about this paper. This is my child that we're
Love
talking
that.
about. And it brings it home. I've also told clients before, or potential clients, you know what? What I'm hearing right now, have this conversation with the principal. The principal's going to work with you. If you bring me in, they're going to bring their lawyers in, and then they have this, and then they have that, and then the bureaucracy is going to get in your way. But if you have a principal or a teacher that's willing to do something on the out of the ordinary, do it. Don't formalize it. Just get it done in the background. Focus on the child. What's the best way to get my child what my child needs? And that goes the same for the teacher also. Like, if you want to do something and try something, work it out with the parent. Not necessarily saying go against your boss all the time, but you know what? Even if somebody finds out you're doing something, oh, you can't do that. You know what? You're focused on the child. What trouble are you going to get into? It's all about the kids to the extent that you can. And one of the things I say, especially with my own children who are both neurodiverse, I care about their mental health and their well-being way more than the academics. The academics will come.
Definitely. And I feel like the academics can follow. One thing that I've continued to emphasize over a strand of podcast conversations here is that we have to build the culture amongst the students before we get involved as the teacher. Once the students get to validate each other, once they have peer-to-peer leadership with one another and have their own voices known, that's when they can actually then move towards understanding their teacher. And we always had that tacky line, oh, we built a family this year, but you kind of did. You're building people who know each other and are working to meet an end goal of finish the school year successfully.
Definitely. The teaching the kids how to interact with each other, and truly building a supportive community.
Exactly. So,
Because too many times there's the bullying, or there's the
mhm,
nasty comments, especially like in elementary school, about stuff. Whereas if we create an environment of, when you said that, why would you say something like that? How do you think that
mhm,
person feels? And kind of
yeah,
like go through that stuff so that we can teach our kids how to not be a bully, how to not be the victim, how to
yeah,
interact and stand up for themselves. And you don't have to like everybody. Everybody doesn't have to like you, but you have to coexist. And how do we
exactly.
coexist?
So you've trademarked the stress-free IEP, which is a title that feels almost radical in a world where
Yeah.
special education meetings are often filled with tension. So what does stress-free really mean for your practice and the work that you do? And how do you make that same emotion come across as possible and tangible for the families that you work with?
So the term came about, I don't even remember, it was like one of my mornings, I was out for a walk listening to a podcast. And what I try to tell parents, like, it's going to be stressful. It's always stressful. I stress out at my own kids' IEP meetings, even though this is what I do for a living. It's stressful. But what I always like to say is that, but we are there with you to take that stress for you
Yeah.
so that you can be a parent. One of the things I say, and my senior attorney does also now, we say all the time, be the parent. There's nothing you can say in an IEP meeting that we can't say, what my client is trying to say is, and put it in the words that we need to get to our goal. It's stressful, it's hard, but if we remain focused on our child and the needs of our child and what truly matters, you can get through it without the stress and in that collaborative way. And just stay true to what you believe is right for your child and focus on your child.
I just had to ask as transparently as a question that I can. Do you find that the bureaucracy gets blurry when you have people not from the classroom sitting around that conference table?
It does, because I have had plenty of cases where central office is coming in and saying, nope, it has to be A, B, and C. And we're like, oh, well, wait a minute. We just had 3 teachers say XYZ. The parents say XYZ. Why are you saying ABC? Well, because this profile needs to, I don't care what the profile, what you read on paper. Like, this is what's in the classroom. This is what we are seeing every day. The people that know. But I'll just say my senior attorney just had that case where the kid was coming in and the higher ups were, no, he needs to go to special ed and da da da. But all of the professionals that have been working with him are like, no, 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 he needs the mainstream. He will be fine. And she won that for the parents because they're the ones that actually work with the kids. And the higher ups, unfortunately, central office, they have their own agenda that they have to follow. And they're more worried about the red tape and the this and the that and the class sizes and where are we going to put them in that stuff than focused on the individual child. And that's where a lot of times there can be some miscommunications and some more fighting than not.
What would you say is a takeaway that our listeners can walk away with, or even the practice that they can think about at the approaching start of the new school year?
Well, for parents to help the educators, one of the things that I say as a parent, what's really helpful for teachers, like, look, reality is your teacher going to read your 35-page IEP and the 7 other 35-page IEPs and really digest and understand your child in the first 2 weeks of school, if at all? No. And so do a one-pager of, hey, this is my kid. This is what my kid needs. This is the main points of focus for my child. And put it towards the social, emotional, and behavioral. Because if the social, emotional, and behavioral needs are not met, the sensory needs, all of that, then the academics are never going to happen. So, hey, teacher, if you want my child to succeed in your classroom and you want to have an easy year with my child, these are the couple of things you need to know. And then teachers, don't wait until you are like, oh my God, with this child. Like at the first sign of like, hey, something's going on, pick up the phone and call the parent. Go read the IEP, talk to last year's teacher, talk to the kid, depending on the grade level, see what's going on. Because I can guarantee none of the kids in your classroom want to be difficult. Kids by nature do not want to be difficult. There's something going on why they're defying. Is it because they don't understand? Because they're too advanced? Because their sensory needs aren't being met? There's too much sensory going on? Like, what is it? And figure that out. Because once you meet those needs for all of your kids, the academics will come.
Definitely. The first parent conference I ever sat in as a first year teacher was the best one I had ever had. It was a parent with a child who had an IEP. She messaged all of us third, fourth week of school to set up a conference just to come in person, sit us all down in front of her so we could see her, just so she could say, hi, I'm so-and-so's mom. My child is in your class. I know this is where he sits in each of your rooms because he says so. Just look out for him, and when you're observing him during class, here are some things that you can do to help him feel successful with that. So here I am, here's my child, here's what they need. I'm here if you have questions. I'm your partner. Have a good year. And that was it. It was just
Yeah.
an introduction. There was nothing accusatory, nothing after the fact. It was all proactive because she had been a principal. That's why she knew.
Yeah.
And she came in just to say, I'm here, I'm your guide, here's my child, here's what they need, case closed. And
Yeah.
when I read the IEP again, it was like, okay, she talked about that, she talked about that, she talked about that. And it wasn't just text on the paper anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that works too, if you can get a meeting. Sometimes it's a little challenging when there's 30 kids in a class or 25
Yeah,
kids. But yeah, no, a meeting works as well. Or just picking up the phone and having a phone conversation with the teacher. But that's it. It's like letting the teacher know I'm that parent in the sense of I'm going to be proactive and I'm going to be your team member. I am
mhm,
not that parent that's going to come in and accuse you of not doing stuff. Now, mind you, if you're not doing stuff, that's a different story. But like starting off on that positive foot, on that positive thing, usually it means that you will be okay. Everybody's going to have a better school year. You know, the child, which is most important, and the parent and the teacher, because you're working together as a team.
exactly. I think that if the expectation is that the teacher and the system tries to humanize the child, and it starts with the parent humanizing their own child as well. So by taking the proactive steps to add that value to your child's needs and work as a team to make that happen, it's one of the best strategies that we can think about today as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, where can our listeners go to learn more?
So Shefter Law PA, our website is shefterlaw.com. I have links to everything on my website. I have my YouTube channel, which my show Stress Free IEP is noon every Tuesday. There's links there. There's a place to register. So you get a reminder email with the link to watch the show live. I have all my prior episodes. I have my YouTube channel. I have my Facebook. I have downloadables, like everything's there. I have a very robust website with a lot of free material for parents to educate themselves. What I say all the time is I wish I didn't have a job. because that would mean the schools are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing and our kids' needs are getting met. And so I want to educate parents on how to advocate for their children so that they don't need me. And just know we're here if you do need us, because there's only so much you can do sometimes, and that sometimes you need that lawyer to come in and get what you need and want. But the material's there to educate yourself and make it work. So shefterlaw.com, it's all there.
Thank you so much for that. So that was Francis Shefter reminding us that advocacy doesn't just begin with confrontation, but rather it begins with connection. And whether you're a parent sitting at the IEP table, a teacher writing out accommodations, or a district leader reviewing a file, there's always room to bring humanity into the process. We have to see the child beyond the paper. The stress-free IEP isn't about sidestepping hard truths, but also about facing them with the tools, support, and knowledge that no one should have to navigate the system alone. So thank you, Frances, for sharing your insight, your heart, and your ongoing work to make special education not just a legal right, but a lived experience of our students.
Thank you. And thank you for having me, Joey.
Thank you for joining us on the Classroom Narratives Healing and Education podcast. If today's episode inspired you or made you think differently, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment or review wherever you listen to podcasts, and stay connected with us on the @Classroom Narratives podcast over Instagram and Facebook. Remember, together we can transform our scars into stars in education, one conversation at a time.